You ever had one of those mornings where you know deep in your bones it's going to be a hell of a day, but you still can't quite believe how fast things go sideways? That's what happened to me the day Karen Thompson showed up at my door, face red as a stop sign, that cheap master key jammed halfway in my front lock, her hands shaking with either rage or the thrill of power. Honestly, with Karen, it was hard to tell which. She'd just broken into my house at 6 in the damn morning, and now she was standing on my porch barking about a safety inspection. But the truth was, plain as daylight, she was accusing me of theft. Me. A guy who spent his life counting other people's pennies. My blood boiled so hot, I thought for a second I'd just explode right there on the porch. Now I know what you're thinking. 6 months is a long time to put up with this kind of insanity from an HOA president, right? But let me tell you, 6 months with Karen Thompson felt like dog years. She was the sort of woman who never missed an opportunity to remind you who was in charge, and if you gave her an inch, she'd take your yard, your house, and your last ounce of sanity. But that morning, watching her wrestle with the key she'd tried to use to break into my place, I realized something had snapped. She'd finally gone too far. She had no clue who she was dealing with, but she was about to find out. Thing is, you want to know how a story like this really starts. You have to go back further than you think. See, the moving truck had barely pulled away from my driveway. The last box wasn't even through the door when she showed up for the first time. Clipboard hugged tight to her chest hair, done up in that no-nonsense military way, everything about her screamed that she'd been preparing for this moment since she was 5. She planted herself square in the middle of my doorway, blocking my way out like she owned the house or maybe the entire world. She didn't even bother with hello. Just Mr. Walker. I'm Karen Thompson, president of the Meadowbrook Heights Homeowner Association. We need to discuss your compliance with community standards. That's how she said it, like I'd been in town for months already guilty of some terrible offense. I was still holding a box labeled tax files, my whole life crammed in with my accounting supplies, thinking compliance. I just moved in yesterday. I barely knew which room was the kitchen. But she didn't care, which is exactly why we need to establish expectations immediately, she snapped, flipping her clipboard open, with the kind of focus most people save for defusing bombs. Your moving truck blocked the community sightlines for 6 hours. Your lawn shows signs of stress from improper hydration schedules, and your garbage bins are positioned 3 inches outside the designated placement zone. I just stared at her, waiting for the punchline, but yeah, no punchline. She was dead serious. I'm sorry I started trying to be polite, but she cut me off with a smile that sent chills down my spine. Successful communities require structure. Property values depend on everyone following established protocols. Surely, as a financial professional, you understand the importance of maintaining asset values. I nearly dropped my box right there. How did she even know I worked in finance? I hadn't unpacked a single business card yet. I answered as carefully as I could, just trying to survive the conversation. Of course, I just need to learn what the rules are. She nodded, satisfied. Excellent attitude. You'll receive your orientation packet within 24 hours. It contains all current community standards, fee schedules, and compliance requirements. And then she started in with the questions, not friendly neighborly ones, but an interrogation asking what kind of accounting I did if I was running my business from home, whether I planned to see clients on site. Every answer seemed to get scribbled down on her clipboard like I was confessing to a crime. It was only my second hour as a homeowner, and already I felt like a suspect. When she explained that home-based businesses needed special permits and quarterly reviews to make sure we didn't disrupt the neighborhood, I got my first real chill. I'd read all about HOAs before I bought the house, thought I knew the drill. But this was something else entirely. I asked if there was a fee for those reviews. She just gave me that same cold smile. All community services carry appropriate administrative costs. Details are in your packet. I think you'll find our fees quite reasonable compared to the value of living in a well-managed community. Translation: pay up or else. 3 hours later, sure enough, the packet arrived certified mail like it was a court summons. 47 pages single-spaced of rules and regulations. There were instructions for everything from the height of your grass to the exact shade of beige allowed for your mailbox, and the fee schedule that read like a torture menu. Administrative reviews, monitoring fees, community enhancement charges, and my personal favorite, a neighborhood harmony charge the board could slap on whenever they felt like it. I was still halfway through page 12 when the doorbell rang again. This time it was an older woman. Gentle eyes, nervous hands. "I'm Sarah Mitchell," she said softly, glancing over her shoulder like she expected Karen to pop out from behind a bush. "I live 3 houses down. Just wanted to welcome you." I introduced myself, grateful for the kindness, and she gave me a look that said she knew exactly how overwhelming Karen could be. "A few pieces of advice, if you don't mind," she whispered. "Pay whatever fees she asks for. Never question her authority in public. And don't even think about rallying the neighbors against her. Trust me." I asked her, "What happens if someone does?" Sarah's face went pale. "The Hendersons tried last year. Argued over a $500 fine for having their Christmas lights up too long. Karen made their lives hell, constant inspections, more fines, anonymous complaints. They moved." Her hands trembled. "She has ways." Sarah left, and I sat at my kitchen table reading through those HOA documents with a new sense of dread. The language was so dense, so heavy, you'd think you were signing up for military service, not just living in a house. But underneath all the legal talk, it was clear the board had total power. The fines were out of control, the enforcement brutal. But what really scared me was a little clause buried in the fine print one that said the board could enter your property for emergency inspections. What's an emergency? Who decides? Where does it stop? My phone rang. It was my mom wanting to know how the move had gone. I lied, of course, told her everything was great, just learning the local rules. But looking out my kitchen window, I saw Karen's house lit up like a war room. And I couldn't shake the feeling I'd stepped into something way more dangerous than I'd ever planned. That Thursday, Karen called an emergency HOA meeting. "You want to talk about theater?" She sat at a table in the front, board members flanking her like generals. The place was packed. Everyone knew about me, the new guy who dared to ask about fees and inspections. It was a show trial, pure and simple. Recent events, she said, have demonstrated that our current oversight may be insufficient. The board is implementing the master key security protocol effective immediately. That's right. Every homeowner would now have to provide a spare house key to the HOA. For safety inspections, she said, and to protect community values. The room erupted. Tom Bradley, retired military, asked for the legal basis. Karen rattled off a county statute number that sounded real enough to scare everyone, but honestly, I'm pretty sure she made it up on the spot. I raised my hand. Could we see the actual statute? And just like that, every head in the room turned. Karen's smile grew even colder. "Mr. Walker," she purred, "you may be new to community living, but responsible neighborhoods require structure. If you disrupt community harmony, there are consequences." There was a pause. Then she announced a $200 fine for me just for asking. The crowd gasped. I realized then Karen had turned resistance into a punishable offense. After the meeting, Tom Bradley walked with me to my car, both of us moving slow, trying not to attract attention. "That was brave," he said quietly. "Or stupid. She's going to make your life hell now." I asked if anyone had ever challenged her. He just laughed. "Henderson's tried. They lost. She has the board, the bylaws, and the appetite for war. Most folks just pay and pray." The next morning, a bill showed up at my door, $200 for disrupting harmony, with a note that if I didn't pay in 10 days, there'd be a lien on my house. I paid it. Not because it was right, but because I was starting to understand Karen. She needed victory. She needed everyone to see her win. If I gave her the satisfaction, maybe she'd leave me alone. Right? That was wishful thinking. Over the next 2 weeks, I handed over my spare key, paid every fee, thanked her for every inspection. I acted the part of the beaten-down resident, something I'd learned from years dealing with hard clients, unreasonable bosses, angry people who needed a target. I let her believe she'd won, but I was watching. And what I started to notice was that other neighbors were watching too. Whispers at the mailbox, questions in the grocery store. I wasn't the only one tired of her games. But Karen, she had bigger plans. The Master Key program was just the start, and I was about to be her favorite test subject. The wellness check came at exactly 6:00 a.m. on Monday, just like Karen promised. I was still half asleep when the pounding started. Not the friendly, "Are you okay in there?" kind of knock, but the kind that makes your heart jump, the kind that says, "This is an invasion." I dragged myself to the door, opened it, and found Karen standing there, clipboard in hand, flanked by Robert Mills and Janet Pierce. All three wore matching expressions of grim resolve, like they'd drawn the short straw for a SWAT team mission. "Good morning, Mr. Walker," Karen announced in that cold, rehearsed tone, reading from her clipboard like it was an arrest warrant. "We're here to conduct the scheduled safety inspection we discussed." I rubbed the sleep from my eyes and tried to look confused, harmless. "Of course, come in." The moment she crossed the threshold, Karen changed. The neighborly mask dropped, replaced by the cold focus of a hunter. She glanced at Robert and Janet. "Split up. Basement, office, main rooms, document everything." They scattered through my house, opening closets, snapping pictures, rifling through drawers, not for safety, but for dominance. For a minute, I just stood there, phone in hand, documenting their every move, every violation of privacy. It was the locked filing cabinet in my bedroom that got her attention. "What's in this, Mr. Walker?" she called. "Personal tax records and client files. Confidential business documents." She didn't even blink. "I'll need you to open it. Community safety requires transparency about potential risks." My stomach dropped. That cabinet held sensitive tax records, social security numbers, everything my clients had trusted me to protect. "I'm sorry, Karen. I can't legally show those files without proper authorization. It's a matter of professional ethics." Her smile was pure predator. "Mr. Walker, I'm the president of your homeowner association. Refusing to cooperate suggests you're hiding something." She was setting the perfect trap: either break the law and betray my clients or refuse and look guilty. "I understand your position," I said as calmly as I could, "but I have legal obligations to my clients that supersede HOA authority." Karen's voice sharpened. "If you have nothing to hide, you should welcome the opportunity to demonstrate your trustworthiness. Robert, call 911. My blood ran cold. She was calling the police on me for refusing to hand over confidential client files during a so-called safety inspection. 20 minutes later, 2 city police officers arrived. Officer Harris, the older one, took one look at the scene and saw right through it. Karen launched into her speech, suspicious behavior resistance to established protocols. She wanted the officers to act like her personal muscle. But Harris wasn't buying it. "Ma'am, can you explain the specific safety concern that requires immediate access to Mr. Walker's private documents?" Karen pointed to the HOA rules. Harris read them, then shook his head. "This appears to be an internal HOA policy, not a legal statute. Private community covenants can't override constitutional protections." Karen went pale. She tried to bluff. "This is private property governed by HOA regulations," but Harris didn't blink. "You have grounds for harassment charges if this continues, Mr. Walker. I recommend documenting any further incidents." When the officers left, Karen lingered in my living room, fists clenched, her plan foiled. "This isn't over," she whispered. "Community safety requires vigilance, and I'm very good at staying vigilant." Then she stormed out, her entourage in tow. I stood there for a long minute, looking around at the open drawers, the turned-over furniture, and the jammed feeling in my chest that told me I'd crossed a point of no return. Karen had declared war. And if I'd learned anything from Sarah and Tom, it was that Karen didn't stop until she'd destroyed her target. Sure enough, the next attack came 48 hours later. A certified letter arrived, hand-delivered by a process server who looked apologetic just to be involved. The letterhead read, Morrison, Clark and Associates HOA Legal Services. Inside Karen's declaration of war, notice of violation and cease and desist. It accused me of vague safety breaches, demanded $700 in civil penalties, and threatened to lien my house if I didn't pay within 30 days. $8,700, nearly 3 months of my freelance income, for nothing but fabricated violations. But the letter didn't feel right. The legal language was too aggressive, too threatening, like someone playing lawyer without a license. I called a real lawyer, Peterson Legal Services. How can I help you? I think I'm being harassed by my HOA president, I said. 5 minutes later, I was talking to Mark Peterson himself. I explained everything. The illegal search, the police, the $8,000 fine. When I finished, Peterson was silent for a long moment. Mr. Walker, you're the third call I've had this month about Meadowbrook Heights. Karen Thompson seems very aggressive. Third call, I asked. Yes. 2 other residents contacted me, excessive fines, harassment threats. Both ended up moving rather than fighting. It's usually cheaper to surrender than fight an HOA with deep pockets. I sat at my desk, looking at Peterson's retainer agreement, the legal bills piling up in my head. And then in a decision that surprised even me, I paid the entire $700 fine. Not because it was right, but because I needed to see what Karen would do if she got the win she craved. Maybe, just maybe, she'd declare victory and leave me alone. Of course she didn't. The very next day, the whole neighborhood knew I'd paid the fine. Karen hosted a community safety rally at the park using my defeat as a trophy proof. Her leadership worked, that she was protecting everyone from a dangerous outsider. Folks nodded, some smiled, but I could see in their eyes a flicker of doubt. A tiny question. Is this really what we want? Friday, a new player arrived. Marcus Smith, private investigator, looking like he'd just rolled out of a 1990s cop show. Rumpled suit, tired eyes, notepad ready. Mr. Walker. I'm conducting background verification for community safety. Mind answering a few questions? I let him in, sat him down and gave him the most boring answers possible. Steady employment, clean finances, spotless legal record. He scribbled notes, took pictures of my certificates, asked about legal disputes. When he finished, I could see he was unimpressed. Politics get complicated in these communities, he muttered. As he left, I realized I'd just passed Karen's background check with flying colors, and somehow I knew that would only make things worse. See, Karen had convinced herself I was a threat. If her investigation found nothing that was even more suspicious proof in her mind that I was a criminal genius. She couldn't admit she was wrong. Her whole reputation depended on being right, so she doubled down. That weekend, I left real estate listings out on the counter, made a few calls about moving before things got worse. If she wanted me gone, maybe she'd back off now that I was preparing to leave. But by Sunday, I had my answer. Karen's car rolled past my house 6 times in 2 days, slowing each time to peer through my window, searching for any sign of surrender. No, she wasn't satisfied. She wanted total humiliation. I knew then the worst was still ahead. Sunday night, I slept with one ear open, sure that something terrible was about to happen. 6 weeks in Meadowbrook Heights and Karen's harassment had followed a perfect pattern test: boundaries meet resistance, escalate force compliance. But this felt different. Her surveillance, her tension, everything about her screamed that she was planning something big. Monday morning, the phone rang. Ben, it's Tom Bradley. We need to talk. Meet me at the coffee shop on Elm in 20 minutes. Don't tell anyone. Tom sat in the far corner, back to the wall, old habits from his military days. Karen's planning something big, he whispered. Janet called me last night, scared out of her mind. Karen's pushing for a comprehensive property investigation for anyone she deems a criminal threat. My blood ran cold. Meaning, she wants authority to search your house top to bottom, confiscate anything she deems suspicious. She's got evidence bags ready. She's planning to stage the search this weekend when you're gone, using the master key. What if she doesn't find anything? I asked. Tom laughed, bitter as black coffee. Doesn't matter. If she finds nothing, it's only because you're too clever to leave anything behind. In Karen's mind, your innocence is proof of guilt. I left the coffee shop shaken, replaying Tom's words in my head. How do you fight someone who's turned logic upside down? Someone who's convinced that your very existence is proof of criminal intent. My phone buzzed. Sarah heard about another meeting. Be careful. You are not alone. I typed a quick thanks, but the truth was, I'd never felt more alone. That afternoon, I made my decision. Some part of me wanted to run, just pack up and disappear, but another part, the stubborn part, said no. This ends here. I started preparing. I secured my real business files in a bank safety deposit box, backed up my computer, warned my clients I might be unreachable. And then I set the trap. I left real estate listings out in plain sight, packed a suitcase, made loud calls about leaving for good. Thursday evening I drove off, but only as far as the next street over. I parked, slipped through the woods, and hid out in my own basement cameras set up to catch every move. If Karen was going to break the law, I wanted it all on tape. By Friday night, I was hidden waiting for her to make her final move. I didn't have to wait long. You ever feel time slow down right before something big's about to hit? That's what it was like sitting in my own basement, eyes glued to the surveillance feeds, the whole house wired with recorders, every entry covered. I'd spent days prepping for this, rehearsing every possibility, but even so, the adrenaline just wouldn't quit. Somewhere out there, Karen Thompson was about to make her final fatal mistake. It was just after midnight when her car rolled up. She stepped out, Robert Mills and Janet Pierce behind her, all three dressed dark, moving fast, heads down. Karen looked like a general prepping for battle, her blazer replaced by a heavy coat. Her clipboard nowhere to be seen. Tonight was for action, not paperwork. Robert kept looking over his shoulder, nerves showing clear in the set of his jaw. Janet's hand shook so badly she almost dropped her phone. They moved straight to my front porch. The master key, the one Karen had wielded like a badge of power for months, slid halfway into the lock and then stopped. She jiggled it, then forced it, frustration turning her face red. "It's stuck," she hissed, not even trying to hide the panic. "The lock's jammed." I had to smile sitting there in the dark because that's exactly what I'd planned. I'd filed microscopic grooves into the lock, just enough to wedge her key solid. There was no way out but to leave the evidence right there waiting for the feds. Still, Karen wasn't one to back down. "We'll have to use the back door," she barked. Out came a crowbar brought along for just this kind of moment. With a splinter and a crack, the back door yielded. They slipped inside. My heart hammered as I watched them sweep through the house, flashlights, darting voices tight. Karen led the charge office, kitchen, then bedroom. Basement office, main rooms, document everything. She sounded almost breathless, not scared, but thrilled. This was her moment to finally crush her enemy. In the bedroom closet, she found a cardboard box marked Evidence FBI Training Materials. She ripped it open, and there they were, prop packages made to look exactly like seized narcotics, complete with fake evidence tags, chain of custody forms, the works. Karen's gasp turned into a shriek. "I found it. Robert, Janet, get in here now." They crowded into the closet, Janet looking like she'd seen a ghost, Robert blinking, stunned. "This explains everything," Karen announced, her voice almost shaking with glee. She snapped photo after photo of the evidence, holding up packages like trophies. "He's been dealing drugs from our neighborhood using stolen FBI materials." "Are you sure?" Janet whispered, eyes wide. "Those are real." Karen barely glanced at her. "FBI evidence tags don't lie. This is a major operation. He's either stealing from federal lockups or he's in with dirty agents. This goes all the way up." The sick part. She really believed it. That's what happens when you spend too long playing judge, jury, and executioner. Eventually, you think the world revolves around your paranoia. "What do we do now?" Robert finally managed. "We call 911 and demand immediate federal response," Karen said, already dialing. "This is Homeland Security. We've uncovered a drug ring using FBI evidence." From my spot in the basement, listening through the hidden mic, I felt almost sorry for her. Almost. The dispatcher answered, cool and professional. Karen launched in. This is Karen Thompson, president of Meadowbrook Heights HOA. We've discovered evidence of drug trafficking using stolen FBI materials. This is a federal emergency. The dispatcher didn't miss a beat. I'm routing your call to the county sheriff's department, ma'am. Please remain on the scene and secure the evidence. Karen bristled. No, this is a federal matter. Sheriff's Department coordinates with the FBI for all local incidents, ma'am. Please wait for their arrival. Perfect. She just demanded the law come down on her own head. While Karen rehearsed her speech in the living room, sure she was about to make headlines for saving the community, I made my final check cameras, running mics, hot all the evidence I'd need for what came next. At 3:47 p.m., the county sheriff's patrol car rolled down Maple Street, lights flashing. Neighbors popped out like prairie dogs, Sarah Mitchell on her porch, the Johnsons with phones ready, everyone certain they were about to watch my downfall. Karen waited at the door, chest out, head high, as if the cavalry had finally come to reward her heroism. "They're here," she announced, triumphant. "This is our moment. Total victory." And then the patrol car door opened and I stepped out, full sheriff's uniform badge, bright in the afternoon sun. For a moment, time really did stop. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a goldfish, her clipboard dropping with a clatter. You're a cop," she whispered. I walked up steady, every inch the lawman I'd been all along. "Ma'am, Detective Ben Walker, County Sheriff's Department, badge 4792. I understand you called about federal evidence." Her face had gone white as milk. The other board members shrank behind her, suddenly realizing the script had flipped. I read Karen her rights on my own couch, the irony thick as fog. "Karen Thompson, you are under arrest for breaking and entering evidence tampering conspiracy to violate civil rights under color of law and filing false reports to federal authorities. Do you understand these rights as I've read them to you?" She nodded, a tiny motion like her whole body was underwater. Robert Mills tried to bolt, but my partner, Agent Miller, was already at the back, cuffs in hand. Janet just broke down sobbing, whispering, I'm sorry, over and over. And there it was, the master key still jammed in the front door, Karen's fingerprints all over it. The evidence in my closet documented and bagged her own phone full of incriminating photos, 6 months worth of recordings, conversations, threats, fines, all in the hands of the feds now. Outside, the neighbors gathered, some shocked, some secretly thrilled. Tom Bradley raised his coffee mug from his window in salute. Sarah wiped her eyes, half laughing, half crying. For the first time since I moved in, the air on Maple Street felt light. As we walked Karen to the car, she whispered, "I was protecting them. Everything I did was to protect this neighborhood." I shook my head. "Protecting is my job, Karen. What you did was terrorize people. There's a difference." By the time the patrol car pulled away, the reign of Karen Thompson was over. If you've ever seen a neighborhood wake up from a long nightmare, you'll know what Meadowbrook Heights looked like that afternoon. Federal agents everywhere, serious faces, dark suits, radio chatter. News vans double parked on every corner, reporters hustling for sound bites. Neighbors huddling in little knots on their driveways, whispering as if afraid Karen might still pop out from behind a hedge. The community center, the same room where Karen had held court for years, was now the site of a federal town hall. Rows of folding chairs filled with 70-something residents, some pale with shock, others wide-eyed, maybe a few fighting the urge to cheer. At the front, agents guarded the doors. In the middle, I stood in uniform for the first time, not as the accountant, but as Detective Ben Walker, undercover no more. The story came pouring out fast and hard, not because I wanted to rub salt in wounds, but because people needed to know the truth. "I'm Detective Walker, County Sheriff's Department." I said, my voice louder than it had any right to be after months of pretending to be powerless. "For the past 6 months, I've been living among you as part of Operation Silent Guard, a federal task force investigating civil rights violations by HOA officials." The room rippled disbelief, then realization, then the start of applause. Sarah Mitchell clutched a tissue, her face a study in relief and regret. The Johnsons stared like they were watching a movie, mouth slightly open. Tom Bradley in the back wore a small, knowing grin, a soldier recognizing another kind of battle. I brought up a map, red dots marking neighborhoods where Karen had consulted, teaching other HOA boards the same tricks. This was never just about Meadowbrook Heights, I said, watching the shock sink in. Karen Thompson made a business out of weaponizing community rules, not to protect but to control. People gasped, heads shaking, as stories tumbled out: illegal fines, mysterious, anonymous complaints, sudden late-night inspections, doors opened by the master key while families were away. She told us it was all legal. Janet Pierce called out, her voice raw. She said, HOA authority overrules everything. I met her eyes. Ignorance doesn't excuse it, Janet. But your cooperation with federal investigators will matter at sentencing. She nodded, tears rolling down her face, the kind you cry when relief and guilt hit all at once. Reporters swarmed the hall, cameras flashing, recording every word. Someone from the local station asked, "Is it true residents will get their money back?" I nodded. Federal investigators are reviewing every fine, every administrative cost. If you paid anything that wasn't legal, you'll get restitution. And yes, there's a victims fund, not just for Meadowbrook Heights, but every neighborhood Karen targeted. The applause this time was loud and real, people standing up, some even hugging, the kind of spontaneous joy that comes from realizing the bad dream really is over. After the meeting, residents clustered around me, some with questions, others just needing to say thanks, some still scared. How do we know this won't happen again? Sarah's voice was small. Who will keep us safe from the next Karen? I looked out over all of the men and women who'd spent months, even years, afraid in their own homes. You keep each other safe, I said quietly. You watch out for each other. You don't let anyone tell you that asking questions is wrong, or that you should just go along to keep the peace. A real community looks out for its own, and that means courage, even when it's hard. Tom raised his hand. Detective Walker, you staying in the neighborhood? It was half a question, half a challenge. He was the kind of man who liked to know who was standing guard. I've been offered a promotion to head up this task force in other states. I told them, voice steady, but you know what, I'm staying right here. The county's putting me in charge of community relations. I'm going to work with every HOA in this county to make sure what happened here doesn't ever happen again. The room erupted this time in cheers. For the first time, I saw hope in those faces. A kind of pride you don't get from a shiny lawn or an HOA's seal of approval, but from surviving something tough and standing together at the end. When the crowd faded, Tom came over, looked me up and down, then shook my hand, grip firm. Knew there was something about you, he said quietly. When did you know Karen would hang herself with her own rope? I smiled, thinking back to every time she doubled down instead of backing off, every time she tried to stamp out a spark and just made the fire worse. The day she decided I was a threat instead of a victim. I said, people like her give them enough power they always find a way to destroy themselves. All I had to do was give her the rope and step back. We walked out into the evening together, the air cool, the street quieter than I had ever heard it. Sarah waved from her porch. Even the Johnsons, who'd always kept their distance, nodded hello. It felt for the first time since I'd moved in like a real neighborhood. And you know, that's what hit me most. 6 months ago, I came here thinking I was just taking on another case, wearing another undercover badge, running down another bully in a cheap blazer. But along the way, something changed. This wasn't just about catching Karen or racking up another win for the department. It was about giving a group of decent folks their lives back, reminding them they deserved better. That justice wasn't just about putting someone in handcuffs. It was about the freedom to live without fear. The master key, the symbol of all Karen's power, sat in an evidence locker, now her fingerprint still visible in the groove I'd filed just for her. It'd show up in Trial Exhibit A in a case that would ripple out to HOAs all over the country. And me, I walked home not as a stranger anymore, but as a neighbor, someone who belonged. Justice, I realized, is a lot quieter than people think. It's the sound of a lock turning in your own door knowing you're safe. It's the hush that follows a crowd after the villain is gone and the only thing left is the good folks you get to call your community. You know, sometimes when a storm finally passes, folks come outside and just stand there blinking in the sunlight like they can't quite believe the quiet is real. That's what Meadowbrook Heights was like the week after Karen Thompson's arrest. The air felt different, lighter, sure, but also fragile, like everybody was waiting for the other shoe to drop. But for the first time in a long while, neighbors actually talked to each other out in the open. Sarah brought over banana bread and left it on my stoop with a note that just said, "Thank you." Tom Bradley mowed his own lawn, whistling the whole time, waving at anyone who passed. Even the Johnsons stopped glaring from behind their curtains and started walking their dog down the street, pausing to chat with folks they'd barely acknowledged before. The sheriff's office set up a temporary trailer at the entrance to the subdivision. Not to police us, but to answer questions, help people fill out restitution claims, and just be present. The FBI liaison was there every afternoon collecting statements, logging evidence, shaking hands. The new interim property manager, a no-nonsense woman from a company 3 towns over, took over HOA duties on day 1. She didn't care if your mailbox was blue or brown, as long as your dues were paid and your dog didn't bite the mailman. She posted a note in every mailbox. You have rights. You have a voice. This community belongs to you. I can't even tell you how many people cried reading that, some from relief, some from sheer disbelief. There were meetings, of course, lots of them. The county made sure every resident understood what happened, how to get help, how to reclaim their money and their peace of mind. They held workshops on homeowners' rights, on how to spot red flags in HOA management, on what to do if you ever feel threatened again. Folks showed up, asked questions, made suggestions, even the ones who used to avoid eye contact at the mailbox. The atmosphere felt like one big, slow exhale. Karen's day in court was in its own way anticlimactic. She pled guilty to federal racketeering, civil rights violations. The works, not because she wanted to, but because the mountain of evidence was just too tall. I watched from the gallery as the judge read out the charges, watched her shrink smaller and smaller in that orange jumpsuit. There was no more clipboard, no perfect hair. Just a woman beaten by her own obsession with control, finally realizing she couldn't bully her way out of this one. When the sentence came down, 20 years plus forfeiture of all her assets, lifetime ban from any HOA or property management role, folks back in the neighborhood actually cheered. The news cameras loved it, but for most of us, it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about closing a chapter that had gone on far too long. Janet Pierce, the board member who'd helped with the break-in, got probation and community service. She'd cooperated early, turned over evidence, even apologized in public. Robert Mills spent a month in county jail, then walked out with a new job at the animal shelter. Folks forgave them slowly, but they did. Because at the end of the day, they'd been trapped, too scared into silence by the same fear that had gripped everyone else. You want to know what happened to me? Well, for a while I was a minor celebrity, interviews, news articles, even a couple of true crime podcasters knocking at my door. I turned them down. I didn't do any of this for fame. I stayed on with the sheriff's department like I promised, working with neighborhoods all over the county. Sometimes I'd meet a young family moving in, worried about the HOA. Sometimes it was an old couple scared to complain about a fee they didn't recognize. Every time I'd tell them the same thing. You have a right to ask questions. You have a right to be heard. And you have a right to feel safe in your own home. Meadowbrook Heights slowly became the kind of place I'd hoped for all along. The new HOA, elected after a full open and very loud community meeting, set up a residents committee, open books, transparent fees, and a rule: no more secret meetings ever. They even put in a little free library out by the park. The plaque says, "To community courage and the freedom to come home." I still get a lump in my throat every time I see it. Tom Bradley and I started meeting for coffee on Saturday mornings. He told me stories about his Army days, and I'd share the latest neighborhood gossip: who was planting a garden, whose kid made the honor roll, who brought the best pie to the bake sale. Sarah Mitchell took over as neighborhood welcome committee, her banana bread now legendary. The Johnsons threw a block party the next 4th of July. For the first time in years, folks danced in the street. Looking back, I still think about how close I came to running. There were nights I lay awake wondering if I'd made a mistake, if fighting Karen was worth it. But then I'd see the way people started standing a little taller, how they smiled a little easier, and I knew sometimes the fight isn't just about you. Sometimes it's about giving people back what was stolen from them, their dignity, their peace, their sense of belonging. You know, there's a line in our job to protect and serve. It's easy to forget what that really means when you're buried in paperwork or politics, but I saw it here. Protecting isn't just about stopping crime. It's about giving people the tools to protect themselves. It's about stepping in when no one else will. And sometimes it's about standing in the dark, waiting for the bad guy to show up and making sure that when the sun rises, the good people still have a place to call home. I'm not going to lie to you, there are still scars. Some neighbors moved away, unable to shake the old fear. Some wounds take time to heal. But the fear that used to hang over Maple Street like a storm cloud, that's gone. Now there's just the sound of laughter, of lawnmowers, of kids playing basketball on the driveway. And every so often, when I lock my front door at night, I catch a glimpse of that master key now in a frame on my wall next to my badge. A reminder that power only matters if you use it for good. That the real strength of a community isn't in rules or fines or titles, but in people who look out for each other, who speak up even when their voice shakes, who believe that home should mean safety, not fear. So that's my story for what it's worth. Maybe you've never had a Karen Thompson on your street, count yourself lucky. Or maybe you're sitting there thinking, this could happen where I live. Let me tell you it could, and it does. But if it does, remember this. It only takes one person to start the fight, but it takes a whole community to win it. And when that victory comes, it's not loud. It's quiet and steady and real. Like the feeling you get when you finally come home, close the door behind you, and know you're safe. And if you've made it this far, maybe drop a comment below. Tell me about your own HOA stories, your victories, your fights, your hopes for your neighborhood. Because as much as I'd love to say this is just a story, I know it's the reality for a lot of folks out there. And I know that together, sharing these stories, we're all just a little bit stronger. You know what I mean?